I'm going to depart from my normal procedure, which is to not prepare remarks, because I like not to know what I'm going to say. But Hitch was too important to give out random words, so I've actually prepared some remarks. Christopher Hitchens was my friend. And even as I say those words, I'm amazed. Every time I used to leave his apartment, usually pretty drunk, I'd walk out the door in amazement, and I'd say, Christopher Hitchens is my friend. What did I do to deserve this? Why on earth would he want to spend time with me? Shortly after his death, I was interviewed on CNN by a cloying and annoying interviewer who tried to suggest that she was intimately familiar with him by calling him Chris on every occasion. And if you knew anything about Christopher, you knew that he'd immediately tell you his name was not Chris. Anyway, I just forced myself to watch it to see how she introduced him. And she said, on the one hand, he inspired the ideals of skepticism, free inquiry, and rational thought in many. But at the same time, he has been called a bullying, lying, opportunistic, cynical contrarian. And she said that as if it was a bad thing. Christopher was a beacon of knowledge and light in a world that constantly threatens to extinguish both. He had the courage to accept the world for just what it is and not what he wanted it to be. That's the highest praise I believe one can give any intellect. He understood that the universe doesn't care about our existence or our welfare, and he epitomized the realization that our lives have meaning only to the extent that we give them meaning. For Christopher, this came through the credo that guided his life, the courageous defense of the simple proposition that skepticism, rather than credulity, is the highest principle that the human intellect can use to ennoble our existence. You can applaud for that. That's his. On a personal level, whenever I spent an evening with Hitch, I came away saying, when I grow up, I want to be an intellectual. The moment you entered his house, you were overwhelmed by a single obsession, books. Books were everywhere, on every surface, on the wall, on the floors, on couches, on tables, and bathrooms. But unlike for many of us, myself included, the books on Christopher's wall were far more than window dressing. They were arranged according to subjects and ideas in a way that made it clear that the books were regularly read, all of them, and consulted, that the knowledge contained within them was used in a sense that few of us really adequately exploit. It was humbling to witness close up an intellect that was so capable of surrounding any subject, relishing it, exploring it for its own sake, critically soaking up everything that's worth knowing. He was ever ready to incorporate this wisdom to shed light on old ideas or critically examining new ones with the full weight of a lifetime of intellectual exploration combined with the playful and curious excitement of a child in a candy store. He embodied the delicious possibilities of existence and the profound sense of satisfaction that intellectual exploration, integrity, and bravery can bring, especially when confronting power with knowledge, even as he openly recognized that the possibility of a successful outcome in any such battle is always slim. Those are the two features that were most crucial to what I admired about the man. It takes courage to speak out against injustice and ignorance wherever you see it, no matter whose sensibilities you ruffle. But it takes far more courage to do that when you realize that the odds are overwhelming that you will lose, that stupidity, prejudice, superstition, hatred, power, and money generally win. But it doesn't matter. You can't give up. But that second feature, that unadulterated joy of ideas in the human experience, the need for irony and humor, and the recourse to the full banquet of human knowledge and culture that set Hitch apart from so many of the rest of us. Charm and wit, when combined with actual knowledge, is not to be underrated. Since his death, I've been told by many people that that's the greatest loss to the cause of reason that brings all of us here today. I have to say personally, that's what guides me. I remember on the day he died, I told myself that to whatever small extent I could emulate any of those qualities in my own work, to keep the candle of joy and wonder and irony that he kept burning, I dedicate my life to that task. And many's a day when I think of how would I want to present something? And I'm guided by that simple question that so many religious people ask in their lives, but I change the wording and I ask, what would Christopher do? The last time I saw him, our discussions ranged from subjects relating to the nature of nothingness, quantum mechanics, and the obscenity that is capital punishment, the madness that governs the religious fanaticism infecting both sides of the Middle East conflict, the embarrassment that is Catholicism, and a related subject, the intellectual laziness and pretentious nonsense that encompasses so much of religious faith and theological noise in our popular culture. Christopher was not a scientist, but he was fascinated by the power of science, not merely its possible impact on human affairs, but more importantly for him and for me, the remarkable ideas that it generates. He was wise enough to recognize that the universe is far more imaginative than we are. And as one who craved experience of all aspects of intellectual life, he was eager to learn from the universe, as he was from the oeuvre of the world's greatest writers, philosophers, and historians. On the last day I was with him, someone came to the door and I answered it for Christopher, and the person delivered a manuscript and asked if I was his manager or his agent. I said, no, I'm his personal physicist. I can think of very few greater honors that I would bestow upon myself than that, in fact. Through his questions and reflections, he extended my own understanding and implications of my own work. Just yesterday, I described how when musing on the material I talked about, he described how nothingness is heading straight towards us as fast as it can. That idea didn't terrify him. He realized that knowledge is not to be gained for comforting our souls, but for enhancing the awareness of being alive. There are two personal aspects of Christopher that may not be apparent to a broader audience, and I want to spend a minute on each. First, what I found so refreshing about talking to the man is that one could never be quite sure about what he'd say about any given subject. For many of us, when we meet like-minded friends, we can remain complacent in the knowledge that we're pretty sure they'll agree with us, or at least we know what they're going to say. But Christopher approached each subject in its own context, not in the context of liberalism or atheism or any ism. We debated the Iraq War late into the night, and we never agreed. But that leads to the other quality I admired so much in him, his incredible tolerance. Now, tolerance might not be the word that the public associated with him listening to him in his public appearances. He had no tolerance for nonsense, for lying, posturing, and he was brave enough to attack even the self-serving, pious evildoers like Mother Teresa, or popular liberal presidents like Bill Clinton, even when it set him apart from popular myths. But on a personal level, he separated ideas from individuals. He had close friends with whom he was diametrically opposed. Francis Collins, a friend of both of ours, is head of the National Institutes of Health. His religious ideas border on the nutty, if you ever listen to them. But not only was he a close friend of Christopher's, in fact, he helped him tremendously in the last months of his life, and he served, in fact, as his medical advisor and friend. Justice Antonin Scalia, who's one of the bastions of evil on the Supreme Court in the United States right now, was nevertheless a regular guest at the Hitchens home. And I know his personal company was enjoyed by both Hitch and Carol on a regular basis. Being able to befriend and charm even your intellectual enemies is something we can all learn from. We can all emulate as we try to bring the light of reason into a world which so often shuts it out. It requires courage and self-confidence combined with the ability to simply enjoy people as people. I want to come close to the end with a bit of advice, which he gave, and I think it's particularly pertinent to this meeting. In his book, Letters to a Young Contrarian, he said, "We are an adaptable species, and this adaptability has enabled us to survive. However, adaptability can also constitute a threat. We may become habituated to certain dangers and fail to recognize them until it is too late. You exist at the whim of people whose power does not derive from your consent, and who regard you as expendable and disposable. You merely fail to notice the moment at which you were conscripted. A normal life consists in living as if this most salient of facts was not a fact at all. Try your hardest to combat atrophy and routine. To question the obvious and the given is an essential element of the maximum de omnibus dubitandum. Doubt everything." In that regard, just before leaving his company on that last day we were together, in one of those poetic accidents that makes life so unexpectedly enjoyable, I was reading a newspaper at his kitchen table, and I was reading about an emerging effort to ensure that young people at elite institutions preserve their Catholic upbringings during and after college. In the last sentence, when describing the temptations to depart from piety, the author wrote, "Exposed to Nietzsche, Hitchens, co-ed dorms, and beer pong, such students are expected to stray." I reflected on what a remarkable tribute to the man this simple sentence represented. To be so overpowering in one's cultural impact that one can be mentioned without explanation is one thing. But to be sandwiched between Nietzsche and beer pong, that's an honor that very few of us can hope to achieve. And it's perhaps the greatest way that Christopher would want to be remembered. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.